Hello everybody, it's coffee time, excellent. Coffee, I think it's decaf. Forget what flavor I put a couple of, mixed them together. Anyway, I had to get my dishes done. I thought I'd read you a little from our once Arafat man, Tass Saada. You watch him. He has coffee time on his Facebook page. Tass Saada with his daughter, talking about current events in Jordan and other nations. Like the Pope is going to where the Babylon is in and these things are coming into play according to the Bible and prophecy, and we're watching it unfold in our time. Well, that still says 3 hours, so I guess they're attaching this to the previous chapter. So this is where I left my page off at chapter 6, Sidelined. So, chapter 5, he met Arafat in his office, and he was sent home with a letter that his mom was not doing well. Alright, then he went back to Saudi Arabia, I think it is, Qatar, and they took his passport, and he asked for it back. And they didn't give it back to him. Okay, outside the airport, an impressive car was waiting to whisk me away to a reception hosted by a prince who was friendly to Palestinians. My service to the cause of justice was honored with speeches and gifts. Soon I was back at my house, receiving the welcome embrace of my parents and other family members. It was wonderful to see my mother again. She wept with joy to know that I was still alive and well. What a celebration we had together that evening. But a few days later, when I found out my father had tipped off the customs department to confiscate my passport, I was upset. Why did you do that? I asked. You need to finish your education, son. He replied. You tricked me, I said, raising my voice. I have been fighting like a grown man for the honor of our people, and you want me to go back to high school? He said the PLO needs members who are smart. How good are you for the cause if you know little? I only got to go up through the 6th grade. You have an opportunity like few other Palestinians. Get a university degree. Then you can go wherever you like. Even work in the Fatah leadership if you want. We already had this conversation 3 years before. I found it even more frustrating this time around. I had seen a lot more of the world by now. Its problems that cried for answers, the realities of fighting and dying, the magnetism of great leadership committed to action. But what could I do? My father had me in a trap. So back to school I went. Here I was, almost 20 years old, a seasoned sniper who had already survived vicious combat, now walking the hallways with 15 and 16-year-olds. Hour after hour, I sat dutifully at a desk, listening to boring lectures and barely containing my resentment. The only pleasure for me was entertaining the other students with stories of what I had been doing at the front with Fatah. Everyone wanted to hear what it had been like. As a result, my popularity was great. But as soon as I got home in the afternoon, I would turn on the TV news. There I learned that the Jordanian army was in the midst of annihilating the Palestinian people. Their tank battalions were overrunning our headquarters as well as our refugee camps. Yasser Arafat pled with King Hussein for a truce, but not only silence. Meanwhile, Arafat's house was bombed, but he was away at the time. Twice the army encircled him, but he always escaped. I was so frustrated I could hardly stand it. After 1 week of fighting, the Fatah losses stood at 3,500 dead and 20,000 apprehended. The newscaster said that whoever could escape was heading north over the mountains into southern Lebanon. Those who were captured by the Jordanians were taken to their secret service headquarters, with torture prison set up in an old palace in the hills outside Amman. Very few came out alive. Whole camps and bases were burned to the ground. Some were even hit with napalm shells, which I assume came from the Israelis. The thought of my friends suffering this kind of excruciating pain nearly tore me apart. Once again, I debated with my father, why did you pull me out just at this time? I needed to be with my men. I wanted to fight until I died, and you prevented it. We both knew that if he had not insisted, I would most likely have been lying in the ashes of a bush camp somewhere, burned or napalmed to death. That thought gave him great relief, of course. For me, it was only a disgrace. By late September, the Arab League managed to get a ceasefire. By then, of course, most of the damage was already done. Arafat was on the run, and his forces were decimated. Boiling over, this left me a sullen, rebellious young man who saw no purpose in life but to cause problems all around me. I stomped into the Katori Palace one day and went on a rampage of screaming, trying to get the officials there to throw me out of the country. It did not work. I kept trying to get suspended from school, but my father's connections with the Ministry of Education were too strong for that. They kept putting up with me, even though I did not deserve their attention. This is how it went for the next 3 years. I fussed and fumed my way through life, a permanent cauldron of bitterness and rage. One evening, my father said, "Tassir, I have another idea. What if you went to live with your uncle in Abu Dhabi and finished high school there. Would you be open to this? I stared at him, pondering the various angles. Moving next door in a Persian Gulf to Abu Dhabi would mean I would have to be supplied with a passport, wouldn't it? Yes, this was a good idea. I agreed. Inside, I was thinking it would put me one step closer to flying back to my comrades. I went out to the airport a day or two later to see the director of the immigration office. Look, I demanded, I need my passport. I know you have it somewhere here. Please give it back to me. For visual effect, I toyed with the grenade in my hand as I spoke, that he would know to take me seriously. Calm down, son, the man replied. We want to help you, but do as your father wishes. We do not want to hurt you. Actually, you are not helping your cause by this kind of demand. In the end, I walked out empty-handed. This made me far less enthusiastic about going to Abu Dhabi, and in time my father dropped the subject. Meanwhile, my patience with school continued to deteriorate. One day my math teacher did something that annoyed me. I jumped up and hit the door with my fist. Then I whipped open my jackknife and lunged at him, the math teacher. The other students in the room began screaming while the teacher ran toward the other side of the room, where he jumped out a window. Seeing that he had escaped, I turned the knife on myself, opening a cut in my stomach. That was enough for the principal to come and have me taken off to the hospital. While there, they were attending to my wound. My older brother and his friend, the chief of police, showed up. He knew me well from past escapades. When we were alone in the room, the chief asked me, "Why did you do this? Are you crazy?" "I don't want to be here at all," I answered. "All right, let me see if I can at least help you get out of this situation," he said. "Here's the plan. In just a minute, I want you to start screaming as loudly as you can. Jump up and go smash the window with your fist. You will cut yourself again, but not too badly. Then I will go outside and say to the nurses, the kid is insane, lock the door and leave him alone. After this, all calms down. You will be released." I did as he instructed. For several days, they left me by myself. Someone would bring me my meal tray, so it set it down quickly and dashed out the door. Again, I had lots of time to think. When my injuries healed enough, I was able to leave the hospital. Wars that only meant going back to school again. I had accomplished nothing. By the middle of 1971, the PLO withdrawal from Jordan was complete. The royal troops destroyed the last 3 bases while 3,000 Fadayin fled into the woods. Another 80 were so desperate they convinced themselves they might fare better with the Israelis than the Jordanians. So they headed for the river, where they were promptly captured and imprisoned in Jericho. Of course, this kind of treatment only spawned more extremism. A new group of guerrilla fighters formed, calling themselves Black September. One of their first acts was to deploy 4 assassins to cut down the Jordanian Prime Minister at the entrance of the Sheraton Hotel in Cairo, Egypt, on November 28, 1971. Next May, they hijacked an airplane and demanded the release of Palestinian prisoners. Then, in early September 1972, they made their world-famous attack on the Olympic Games in Munich, Germany, killing 11 Israeli wrestlers, weightlifters, and coaches. I could not help but wonder if, given the strange twist of history, I might not have been myself joining this group had I stayed in place with Fatah. Instead, my life was the deadening rhythm of classes and assignments. I hated every day. I could see no further for myself. All the excitement of living was in the past. The untouchable. I held a job sometimes, but not for very long. I certainly did not want to take up my father's trade in the automobile business. I dreamed away my time, causing trouble. One day, in my religion class, I cheated on a test. The teacher wrote the questions on the board and I copied them down on the paper but included the answers. Wrote down only the questions, widely spaced. Then that evening I sneaked back into the building. Tiptoed from the teacher's lounge, found the test questions, located the teacher's book, and constructed my own accordingly. Then put my completed test in the rack with all the others. When the tests were returned to the class a few days later, I was shocked to see my grade 0. I was incensed. Sheikh Abdul Salam, I shouted. Why did I get this grade? My answers are perfect. Just look at your own book. You will see. The short little man came over to look squarely into my eyes. Yes, your answers are indeed perfect, according to my book. That is because you wrote them after the test was given. You cheated, and we don't reward that. Maybe you think your family is well known and influential, that you are untouchable. He continued, not so. You are nothing but a bug. I can squash you whenever I like. I was not now absolutely livid. There he stood, wearing the silly red hat of a religious teacher, having gained all his wisdom from books, and he was reproaching me. The battle-tested warrior who had stood up to Israeli cannons. I had risked my life for things he would never be close to achieving. Do you think it makes you all to wear that cap? I snarled. I snatched it off his head as I stood up. I'll get you, I warned, then walked out of the classroom. That evening I drove through the streets with still fuming. What a little weasel he was. I was nearly shaking with anger, and then suddenly, out of the corner of my eye, I saw a familiar form in a car passing the opposite way. It was my religious teacher. I screeched into a U-Haul and began telling him. He pulled into a shopping mall and jeered. Parked. I took the spot right behind him and jumped out, grabbing my revolver as I did. I yelled his name. He swung around, startled. Before he could say a word, I shouted, "You think I consider myself untouchable, do you? Well, you're right. That's what I am." With that, I found a shot about a point-blank range. He crumpled to the asphalt paving. I jumped back to my car and drove away. The next morning at school, I was summoned to the principal's office, but then I could hardly believe my eyes. There waiting for me in a chair sat the religion teacher. "What?" I explained in shock. "Did not kill you last night." "No, thanks be to Allah," he replied. "Somehow my bullet had missed him. How could this be?" "Don't worry, I'll get you next time," I said. That's when the principal spoke up. "So it is true then, you really shot at your teacher?" I had trapped myself. I nodded assent to the fact. Saying he called the police to come get me. While we were waiting, you told me this is the end of your attendance at the school. You're expelled. I didn't care. The chief of police, my friend, after all my earlier escapades, took me away that day. I had committed a serious crime, of course, but once again, my father's connections bailed me out. He began talking with the police, minister of education, and others in high places. Soon an assault charge against me was dropped. A government official did say to my father, "However, we need to find a solution for your son. Things cannot go on like this. Please think up something." French lessons. Not long after this, I stumbled across an interesting distraction. I was driving to downtown Doha when I happened to glance at the sidewalk when a gorgeous young European woman was walking. Her miniskirt captured my attention. I slowed down and began few blocks and then entered a building marked European Language Academy. Parked my car and nonchalantly walked inside. "Excuse me," I said to the man at the reception desk, "but I was just considering who that person was who entered a minute ago." He gave me the woman's name and said she taught French at this school. In a matter of seconds, I found within myself a deep love for learning the French language. "When does the next term begin?" I asked. "Next week," came the reply. "How long is the term?" 9 months. "And what are the costs?" 12,000 rials, which would equal about $3,500 US. The evening at dinner, I launched into an eloquent speech with my father about the importance of my learning French. "I found an excellent academy today," I said. "I can learn so much there. They teach you really quickly and it will help me move on in my studies." My father nodded approvingly. Maybe his unruly son was finally starting to get the message. "That's a very good idea, Taser," he said. "I would encourage you to sign up, even though it's a little expensive, but we can afford it." It didn't take long, however, for me to discover that my French teacher was already married to the dean of the facility. I should have checked that one before enrolling. It did not stop me, however, from flirting with her during class. She was pleasant enough toward me, although she drew the line at my repeated suggestions that we got together outside of class. At the same time, it seemed all I could get out of this experience was an introduction to the French language. But that was something that would actually serve me well in days to come. After 7 months, I told her I was going to drop the course. Please don't do that, she requested. You should be at least finish what you've started here. No, I don't like the point, I responded. It has been nice to meet you anyway, and with that, I was out the door. My father just sat me down for a talk. All right, here are your choices, he announced in a firm voice. England or Europe, which will it be? I know he had connections in both countries, friends who could keep an eye on me. No, I resorted. Can't stand the British, and the Europeans are a bunch of cowards. They haven't helped on because of they haven't helped our cause at all. If I have to go somewhere, I want to go to America. This was not because I liked the Americans any better. After all, they supported the Jews, but I had a boyhood friend already living in the United States, and maybe I could go be with him. You are not going to that satanic country, my father announced in a firm voice. Why not? I shot back. The argument proceeded from them. Why should he get to run away? Why should he get to run my life on this age? I was old enough to make my own decisions. The only trouble was I needed his money to carry them out. I kept resisting him, however, until the end of 1973. He finally gave in. Lord, you have caused me more problems than all your brothers and sisters combined. He said with a heavy sigh, I give up. Go wherever you want to go. Do whatever you like. Here is your passport. Tell me how much money you need. Just go and leave us alone. In that moment when I saw him, deep his pain was, my heart felt a bit heavy. Even though he had tricked me into leaving Fatah, even though I had no reason now to go on living or do anything productive. I loved this man. I was sad to hurt him along the way. All right, Father, I said I will get out of your way by going to America. I showed up the next day at the American Embassy to seek a visa. The clerk began pulling out documents for me to complete. They wanted to know how much money I had and how much would be taken into their country. They wanted to know where I had lived for so long in my life, the bigger problems, and how their request for a character reference from the country that had issued my current passport, Jordan. I knew in an instant that I was in trouble. There was no way the Jordanian government would say I was a good guy. After all, I had tried to assassinate their crown prince. Went home and told my father about the dilemma. I knew that the Jordan ambassador Cater was a good friend of his. Maybe he could pull some strings. We went together to see the man in his office. I stood there hoping that maybe his information would be incomplete and that the Jordanian ambassador Cater was a good friend of his. Maybe pull some strings. We went together to see the man in his office. I stood there hoping that maybe his information sources would be incomplete on me. Maybe he didn't know everything I had done while living in Jordan. My son needs a reference to travel to Florida, my father said innocently. Would you be so kind as to take him out of this control? Take care of this for us. Of course, the ambassador, we would be honored to assist. Anything for a good Palestinian like you. Try to help it keep a straight face. Soon the ambassador said to me, we'll get the paperwork done and stop back in a couple of days to pick it up. Certainly. I replied, shaking his hand as we spoke. When I came back, the reference was not yet ready. The clerk explained this kind of thing had to be cleared in Ammon first. They could not just go do it on their own here in Doha. But don't worry, he asked, the master will still do it as soon as he receives your words from the capital. A week later, the paper still was not ready. I grew suspicious. The consul said the ambassador is very busy, but I believe I can handle the details on this. Please wait. Wait, what details do you mean? I asked as I sat there. Is there a pathfinder? Is there a problem? I did not trust this man. Everyone knew he worked with Jordanian intelligence. Actually, my friend, he said as he shuffled some papers on his desk, you will need to go to Ammon yourself to get the reference. It can't be generated here after all. I stared at him. This was ridiculous. There was no sense playing games with him. Came out bluntly. Do you think I'm stupid or what? What are you talking about? Listen, I shot back from gritted teeth. With all due respect, you can take the government, all the Jordanian people, and go I won't set word in your stupid country place. We beg your pardon. He said, well, this kind of attitude is exactly why they want you to come to Jordan. You have connections to your enemies. Why are you asking for a character reference when you're the devil himself? About this time, the ambassador came out of his office. What's going on here? He asked. This man thinks he's all of the council. Snapped with a wave of his hand. He just told me the whole Jordanian people come to you for all he cared. Did you really say that? Ambassador said to him, his eyes wide with suspense. Told the truth. Yes, I did. And I think you know why. You know what your government has done during my stay. He re-eyed one another wearily. He showed me to a chair and then declared my country hasn't done anything bad to your people, nothing at all. It's really your people's fault. I could not argue with that last sentence, so instead I said, Mr. Ambassador, I'm fed up with this kind of life. I want to leave Qatar, but I am not going to go to Jordan. You know exactly what would happen to me. Sorry, lost my place. So instead I said, Mr. Master, I'm fed up with this kind of life. I want to leave Qatar, but I am not going to go to Jordan. You know exactly what would happen to me over there. Well, if you're head up with life, as you say, why not go to Jordan? If you want to die, people there can take care of you. No, I don't want to give them that satisfaction, I replied. You know what? Just forget it. I'll find a different way to solve this. With that store, I stood up and left. My next stop with the Qatari chief of police. I didn't need to introduce myself. Of course, I was planning to travel abroad. I said for that I need a certificate of good standard conduct. He broke into a glance of laughter. You're hilarious, you know, he said. After all, you've been around. You want such a document? Hardly. Again, begging him, I told him what had happened with the Jordanian embassy. He kept smiling at the predicament I had created for myself. Finally, he settled down and said, well, I'll see what I can do. Come back next week. When I showed up again, he handed me a signed letter. It was very short. Basically said I had lived in Qatar for such and such a period of time. That was it. Figured I would try this with the Americans and see how far it would get me. I walked to the embassy and gave them my name. Pulled me out the file on me that had started weeks before. I laid out the fee money in the counter. Just then it dawned on me I had left the chief of police letter in the front seat of my car. Before I could excuse myself to get it, the clerk, said, "How long do you intend to stay at the U.S.?" Hattie, huh? How should I reply? I'm not sure. I said, "At last, whatever length you can grant me, how about these days?" That was enough to satisfy her. She located the note for the documented by my father's company. She commented, "Okay, come back in 10 days. We'll have your visa ready then." Okay, come back in 110 days. We'll have your visa ready then. She never did remember to ask for the statement of good confidence. Conduct. I returned to the embassy on the appointed day. They handed me my passport with the visa stamped inside. I thanked them and turned away quickly. I flipped the page and saw to my utter amazement a visa that was good for 5 years with multiple entries. Why in the world had they been so generous with me? What a lucky man I was. Father, we hustled to buy a ticket, and I began parking. The goodbyes was not my family, my emotion and warmth. I didn't know when I would see family again. But everyone knew this was the best option for me, far better than staying in Cape Town. I boarded an Alatia flight from Dubai to Rome on February 12, 1974, just a few days after my 23rd birthday. The connecting flight and jumbo jet took me to Masad. I then caught a connection to Chicago and out onto Lucas of St. Louis. Then finally a tiny two-propeller plane in Columbia, Missouri, where my friend lived. I might as well have stayed off onto a few men came. Hopefully I read that right. It's falling asleep. Fall asleep. Well, next chapter is Stranger in a Strange World. We will pick up tomorrow. Okay. Have a good night.